Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So we were discussing the conversation that took place in the presence of Swami Arupananda, or who was then known as Ras Bihari Maharaj, in the house of Kiran Babu. One devotee was there, Kiran Babu, in whose house Holy Mother stayed during her visit to Varanasi. So she is telling something very important, which you will not get. Of course, it is there in the different scriptures, especially the Kashi Khanda. The Kashi Khanda uh, is a book which explains to you the importance or the significance of the various things in Banaras. So Banaras has been called as the golden city. The literal name Banaras has come from the shining city, the golden city, to literally translate it. So what is so golden about it? They say it is full of consciousness. Shiva gives moksha in that place. So let us hear from Holy Mother herself what she has said about Banaras, because there are so many questions which Arupananji asks her, and he gets satisfactory answers to all those questions. So the first disciple is asking the question. All the pilgrims touch the image of Vishwanatha Shiva. Vishwanath is the famous presiding deity of Banaras, all of you know. And the Shivalinga is on the floor, and there's a hollow, and people have to sit down, and people can easily touch it. And strangely, people are allowed to touch the Shivalinga. In certain other temples like Rameshwaram and even Somnath, Jyotirlinga, there people are not allowed to go. The shrine Garbha Mandir uh, is slightly, not accessible to all. So only the pujaris, whatever offering you give is offered. If you see Somnath Shiva, nobody is allowed to touch it. Whereas Vishwanath, right from beginning, that is the tradition, and people can sit there, do Abhisheka and other things, and even touch the Shivalinga. So this the disciple has seen. So he's asking Mother the question. So he says, therefore, it's bathed in the evening. Afterwards, the priests worship the deity and give the food offering. So during the day, pilgrims and devotees are allowed to touch the Shivalinga. So they get the idea that perhaps he gets polluted. And that's why they bathe, before offering, they bathe Shivalinga with Ganges water and then give food offering to the Lord Vishwanath, which is the presiding deity of Banaras. So Mother says, she says something very significant. She says, the priests allow people to touch the image out of greed for money. So she was not in favor of all these things. Why should they do so? Why should they do so? It is enough to see the image from a distance. Otherwise, people of immoral character would touch the image. You see, this is a very significant thing. The tirtha gets the tirtha becomes pure by the visit of great people like Sri Ramakrishna and others. They normally go to the tirtha to uh, give us a kind of sanctity or impart some kind of sanctity to the shrine and to the image also. So Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Mother Kali, he awakened that deity, and that place is full of vibration. So also many other saints, direct disciples. So comparatively, the Bhavatarini of Dakshineshwar is a recent, you may say, compared to some of the very, very old temples like Banaras Vishwanath. We do not know its history, how long before it was, the people have started worshipping it. So there are so many vibrations associated with that. But at the same time, if you indiscriminately allow people to touch the Shivalinga, then they give some bad vibrations. So Holy Mother is of the opinion that it's better people worship from a distance. So you don't, now somebody with impure mind goes and touches the Shivling, and then somebody who wants devotion, who wants spirituality goes, perhaps he may get those vibrations of the people who have just touched. So in any case, Holy Mother doesn't agree. But he says it is the greed of money. Priestcraft has spoiled religion and spirituality in almost all the religions. It's it's priestcraft. That's why Jesus, when he went to the synagogue, he found that there were money lenders, people who were lending money for an interest and changing coins, coin changers also they call. So they were earning a nice discount, I mean, a commission. And Jesus was very much agitated to see. He says, "You have turned my father's place," father's means the place of God, into a shop, into a devil's den. So that day he was so aggressive, Jesus, that he took a stick and drove out all those money lenders. And then that's why the priest class and the others who were jealous, who were earning money using the priestcraft which they practiced, they got angry on Jesus and ultimately they crucified him. So similarly, here also Holy Mother says it is greed that make even Sri Krishna, the priests of the other temples, when Sri Krishna had stopped worshipping, the other priests, out of jealousy, they used to uh, hate and even criticize Sri Krishna because he would not follow their principles. His worship was purely sattvic and they were always greedy for money. So he says, if people of immoral character are allowed in the name of rituals to touch the Shivalinga, then the sanctity will go away. Then she says, what happens to her when some people, impure people, touch her? She says there are some people whose very touch creates a burning sensation in the body. It is so painful. Therefore, I wash my hands and feet with Ganges water after they touch me. Fortunately, the rush of people here is less than in Calcutta. When she has come to Banaras, nobody knows her. So she has some peace of mind. But in Kolkata, people used to just go to get the grace of Holy Mother with so many worldly desires. And they just thought that if Mother touches us or we touch the feet of the Mother, maybe we will get our desires will be fulfilled. So he says that impure touch. Impurity here means impurity can be of many kinds. The impurity may be the selfish desire to get name and fame or money or something else. So with that desire, if somebody goes even to a place like Vishwanath Shiva and then touches the Shivalinga, perhaps some of his tamasic or rajasic vibrations he leaves behind. And it requires a lot of sattvic people to really sanctify that shrine. So Sri Krishna's tapasya and his daily worship for so many years, nearly 15 years that he worshipped, would have created such strong vibrations that even now when ordinary people go, fortunately they don't allow anybody and everybody to go inside. You have to just worship the Lord. Most of the temples, even in Tirupati, they don't even allow people to stand there. You just have to have darshan and go away because of this reason. So disciple says, one can see, now he's asking mother, one can see you are here only after obtaining permission of the senior swamis. This arrangement has been made in order to lessen the rush. Now, one of the reasons why the direct disciples thought, one was they had to leave the Kashipur, or maybe she was finding it difficult till Udbodan was constructed by Swami Shardananda. Holy Mother had no fixed place to stay. They used to rent some house, Lakshmi, Ghusudi, there was a place, then there was Nilambar Babu's garden house. Sometimes she used to go to Jairambati, Kamarpukur, which was her Thakur's residence, but she was not treated well there, and there was a lot of poverty. She didn't have source of income, and whatever little income was there, 7 rupees per month, which Sri Ramakrishna had arranged for her. He knew that she will face difficulty after his passing away. Nobody would perhaps look after her, so he had arranged, but even unfortunately that amount was stopped. So she was suffering from a lot of problems when she was in Jairambati. So now and then when she fell sick or maybe for some other reason, she used to come, and the devotees would be very happy to make arrangements for her stay. Some of the close devotees, not all. So Banaras trip was also arranged with that idea, and that they knew that if mother stays in Kolkata in anybody's house, there will be a huge crowd. But Banaras, she was less known. So he says, the senior Swamis have done you a favor by shifting you to Banaras. Mother says, who cares to hold court as it were at different places? Now she is saying something s- significant. She says, it's okay, they have shifted me, but then why do I care? Where I don't care where I am. I have to somehow manage wherever I am. So I'm not very much concerned. Of course, they have done with good intentions, but he says, I don't care. She was all above all these things because she had that infinite capacity to even suffer for the sake of humanity. So she's giving an example. She says, her lunatic, now this disciple is giving a small footnote. Her lunatic sister in law, that is Radhu, tormented her even in Banaras. Referring to this, she said, perhaps I worshipped Shiva with bilwa leaves having thorns. So she just, out of irritation, in the sense, the trouble was so much that she felt, why this girl is troubling me so much. Both were not normal people. So she says that lunatic sister-in-law tormented her even in Banaras. So he said, perhaps one of the reasons, she says, is I was not careful enough to offer Shiva the bilwa leaves which had no thorns. Perhaps inadvertently, I have worshipped Shiva, and that thorn, by doing that worship, the karma has come upon me. And of course, it was said in a very jocular way. She was saying, perhaps I offered thorns, and that is why I get this suffering in the gross world. Therefore, I have this thorn in my life in the shape of this sister in law. So, that thorn which I offered to Shiva has come back to me in the form of this thorn, who is always after me and pestering me wherever I go. She went to Banaras to avoid the crowd, and this sister in law she has to take because there was nobody willing to take care of her. That was the Divine Mother's will. You see, nobody would, even their own, uh, the family was not willing to take her. It was only the Holy Mother who could digest this sister in law. Anyway, so she says, perhaps unknowingly. So now the disciple gets confused. He said, suppose unknowingly we offer thorns, will we also suffer? Sometimes it happens inadvertently, we are not very careful when we worship. So he says, disciple says, how is that? What's the harm in offering thorny bilwa leaves to Shiva unknowingly? That's the argument we all give. We are careless, and then we expect our carelessness to be pardoned. So, mother says, no, it is extremely difficult to worship Shiva. It harms a person even if he makes a mistake unconsciously. But the fact is that those who are having their last birth suffer from the effects of past karma in this one. Now, there are two arguments here. One has to be very careful. It is not out of despair, Holy Mother is saying, oh, I have worshipped Shiva with bilwa leaves, with thorns, and so now there is a thorn in my life. But she is taking it in a very positive way. That's why she says, but she says it harms a person even if he makes a mistake unconsciously. But at the same time, he is not saying it is bad after all. He says if it is your last birth, then you will, uh, I mean, you will have to undergo all this suffering. You have to finish with all the sufferings. You remember there was this famous incident where Swami Premeshanandji was Holy Mother's disciple. So he came to Holy Mother, and Holy Mother, as soon as she saw him, seeing the samskaras and other things, he says, you may have to be born 3 times. So he was a bit upset. He says, but she said, there is a hope. If you are able to withstand, finish all the sufferings in this life, then you may get mukti even in this life. So immediately jumped at joy and he said, "No, mother, let me finish everything in this life. Let me not postpone it for 3 lives." So he was so impatient. So also, Holy Mother says, if this is the last life, perhaps these thorns and other these things are simple excuses. These things, maybe it is the last life, that's why so much of suffering. Since it is the last birth, the prarabdha karma has to be exhausted. So the example that is given is a person who is a jivan mukta. They say, why does he suffer? Holy Mother is definitely liberated even before she was born. There's no question of liberation. But even those Nitya Muktas, other lower Nitya Muktas who have been born with her, why do they suffer? The answer is Prarabdha karma has been explained as that which has to fructify. You can't prevent it. But as Holy Mother said, maybe instead of a sword wound, a pin prick, you may get away with a pin prick. That is what japa can do for most of us, for all of us. But still, that prarabdha has to work out. The example that is given is, suppose there is a chariot, it is moving, the wheels are moving, and then mukti means suddenly somebody breaks the chariot. So there is no further motion. But they say the wheel comes out, and one of the wheels, or maybe all the four wheels, they still have a momentum of the past. The carriage crashes and stops there. So there's no further karma which will be affecting that jiva. But because his prarabdha was there, the rotating wheels, which already had momentum, some momentum, it will go for a certain distance and then it will drop down. So that is how you explain, if somebody is a nitya mukta, why should he live or why should he suffer? He should not suffer because he is already free. Then what's the fun in having freedom? But he doesn't feel, just as the chariot does not feel if the wheels are going scattered in all directions. So he doesn't, he takes it as a divine play. So that's what Holy Mother is saying, that I don't mind, I don't think these are sufferings. Even if I've offered some thorns, maybe it was an excuse for me. I mean, she's trying to console him. She has no birth, she has no death. That's a different issue. But she's trying to tell Arupananda, you should not be discouraged by these sufferings. This is a reason. So those who are having the last birth, maybe they suffer a little more because the effects of the past karma have to be worked out. The prarabdha has to be worked out. So then she says something very significant. You see how with conviction Holy Mother is saying, I do not remember such a statement. If somebody makes, it shows how perfect Holy Mother was. She says, I do not remember having committed any sin since my birth. Can you imagine what kind of purity she would have had? Because Thakur used to say, uh, or Holy Mother herself used to say, that even the moon has a small scar. But I used to pray to Thakur or pray to the Lord that, see that my mind even does not have a scar. It should be milky white. I don't even like to have a scar. Even the moon, the beautiful moon, which is praised by everybody. We say when we see the full moon, we are so happy. But even that has a scar. So, but she used to pray to the Divine Mother or to Thakur that, please see that I don't even have a scar. Let it be totally white. So she says, she says, I don't remember having committed any sin since my birth. I touched, in the physical sense, I mean, though she was married, I touched the master at the age of 5. I might not have understood him at that time, but he undoubtedly touched me. That's the only contact they had, physical contact they had. So that shows the amount of purity she must have uh, had to have this kind of attitude. And she, with conviction, Holy Mother says that I don't remember having committed any sin in my life. Why should I suffer so much? If that is the case, if I have not done anything, from where does this karma come? Why do I suffer so much? Now she gives the answer. Otherwise, everybody will say, if it is because of karma, then why should she suffer? Why should she suffer burning pain? And why should this mad sister-in-law always create trouble for her? Throughout her life, she had that uh, trouble. till her Mahasamadhi. Only the last few days she totally withdrew her mind and said, I don't care what happens to you. She got totally detached. She knew that my time is over. Now I should not be attached. So she could detach at will. Though she appeared to be so much concerned about this mad sister-in-law and willingly took upon this suffering like a thorn. And she gave an example that perhaps I have offered, but that is not the exact reason. She gives the reason here. He said, I have not performed any sin. So why am I suffering so much? She says, by touching him, others have been are being freed from Maya. So even if I have touched Sri Ram Krishna, it was when I was a small child. So others, even by touching his feet, or if he touches somebody out of his grace, they would get freedom. They will free from Maya. And why I should have alone, I alone should have so much of entanglement. Now this is confusing the disciple a little bit, because he says if mother is entangled, then what about us? But she says, why should I do? Day and night my mind wants to soar high. You see, this has to be understood in the proper context. It's not that her mind is forced to come down. The mind wants to soar high. If you remember, when Radhu was born, it was she had a vision, or when some of these relatives, they said she is Yoga Maya. Without her, mother's mind would have soared into samadhi. So somebody was necessary to bring her mind down with all these abuses, with all this scolding and all those things. She used to be so difficult to deal with. Perhaps that resulted in uh, in her mind coming down to our ordinary plane so that we could get the benefit. So he says, day and night my mind wants to soar high. I force it down out of compassion for people, and yet I am so tormented. See, I come down for the sake of people. So people, instead of taking advantage, people like Radhu are tormenting me. Then she says something. Then the disciple asks another question. Let them do whatever they like. Please bear with us all. So the disciple is getting a little worried. He is worried that does my touch actually cause her torment? So he's saying, please bear, because he knows if mother is not there, what will be our condition? A person cannot be angry so long as he is conscious of himself. So now what he means is that please don't be angry, because Sri Krishna had said, if I am angry, Brahma, maybe somebody will save you. But if mother is angry, then Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, all three will not be uh, will be powerless to save you. So with that idea in mind, he is afraid that if mother gets angry on even Radhu and the others, then what will happen to us if inadvertently we displease the mother? So he says, please bear with us all, and very cleverly he says a person cannot be angry so long as he is conscious of himself. If you are conscious of your Atman, or if you are not identifying yourself with a reactive mind, then you can't get angry. So he's trying to tell something like a child to Holy Mother that you please don't get angry. There's no question of mother living on that plane and being reactive like us. She used to say forbearance is a great virtue. So titiksha, or forbearance, is a great virtue. There's no virtue like that. So mother says, right, you are my child. There is no other virtue higher than forbearance. So forbearance means to be conscious of the higher reality and not be bound by Prakriti, not identify yourself or ourselves with the reactive mind. So the more we can do it in our life, the more we try to keep the mind on a higher plane, or be one with the consciousness. So if he is conscious of himself, when Rasbihari Maharaj says, if one is conscious of himself, means conscious of our Purusha, the Purusha within, or the Brahman within, or the Ishta within. Whenever we keep our mind at that state, then we can't get angry. So he was true. So Holy Mother agrees. And he says, it's fine. I mean, forbearance is a great virtue. This is a body of flesh and blood. But she says, sometimes I may say something in a fit of anger, but it is temporary. So even though he says, since this is a body of flesh and blood, since she has willingly chosen to become gross, she has all the characteristics of a gross human being. So he says, out of fit of anger. For example, once Radu threw a burning charcoal on Holy Mother. So she, out of anger, she had to scold her, though she had tremendous patience. So she says, since I have been born of flesh and blood, huh, you should, uh, I may say something in a fit of anger, but don't worry. I mean, she's trying to console him that I'll not get angry on all of you. If I, because Raspberry Maharaj thought, because if mother gets angry, where will we go? Huh? Then the mother added, saying to herself, he who wants others in time is a true friend. Now, this is very significant. What's the use of saying ah when the right time has passed? Now, she is saying that the true guru or a true Ishta or God gives us warning right in time, and it should be said at the right time. If you say, oh, I had warned you not to do it, allow the child to play with fire, and when it burns, you say, I told you not to do it. But why can't you warn him? And at that time, after, he said, if you had said long ago and see the child going towards the fire and you don't stop on time, then he may just go and burn himself. So he says, he who warns in time alone is a true friend. If you are a true friend, you'll warn people before he has committed, because after that, there's no point in consoling or telling him, oh, don't worry. This is what is the use of saying ah when the right time has passed? So one has to be alert always. So on the next day, that is 11 December 1912, Holy Mother was still in Banaras and was listening to the reading of the Kashi Khanda. So after the reading of the book, she was engaged in conversation with the disciple. Then the disciple asked, because that is mentioned in the book, he says, do all that die in Banaras gain liberation? There is this sentence, or there is this verse in the Kashi Khanda which says anybody who dies in Banaras. That's why people go and to spend the last days of their life in Banaras. Then mother says the scriptures say yes. You see, in the beginning she doesn't want to say emphatically. She says the scriptures say yes. Now whether you believe in the scriptures or not, that is up to you. Then the disciple says, but what is your direct experience? He doesn't want to hear what scriptures say. Said scriptures say, but what do you say? I want your direct experience. The master saw, means there is in the Lila Prasang, it is there, Sri Krishna himself saw how Shiva is giving mukti. Kali comes, the Shakti comes first and cuts the knots, the bandhan of Maya. And Shiva utters the Taraka mantra. Taraka means that which raises you. So he utters the mantra in the ear of the corpse, a dead corpse. Sri Krishna had a live vision of that. He saw that first the mother comes, and whatever little bondage was there, naturally any person who dies will be a worldly person. He would not have, if he has already got mukti, like Kabir Das once said, he deliberately went out when he knew he is about to die. He said, if Rama's name can save, he can save me outside Banaras also. Why should I die here? And just to prove that, he went outside and died. He did not die in Banaras, though he lived in Banaras. So also here, Sri Krishna is saying, Srima Sharda Devi is saying that the scriptures say that. But what is your direct experience? The master saw Shiva himself whispers the holy mantra, the Taraka Brahma mantra, into the ears of the dead. Mother says, I don't know about it, my child. I have not seen anything of this kind. Now she is saying, I have not seen all these things, but I don't know Sri Krishna if he has said this. So she is becoming very rational now. Then disciple says, I cannot believe unless I hear something from you on this point, because he has not heard Sri Krishna speaking this. So he says, how can I believe if somebody says Sri Krishna has said that? I want you to tell me, because she was his guru. So he says, Mother says, well, now you see how nicely she answers. Mother says, well, I shall tell the master. R means Ras Bihari. Ras Bihari doesn't want to believe. Please show me something about it. So she says, I will ask the master, and if he shows me something, then I will tell you. Right now, you have to believe him, but I have to pray like that. Ki Rasbihar is not believing your words, so please show me something, and he wants to believe me. If I can show it to him, or I can tell him, he has faith in me. He has not seen you, so perhaps he may not believe it. But if he, if you show something to me, something similar, how Shiva comes and liberates the jiva, how he comes and liberates the dead person after his death, how he gives him moksha. If you show me the vision or the process, how it is done in a subtle form, then I will tell him. So she says, I'll uh, pray to Thakur and let you know. And then I referred to the destruction of temples in many places in India during the Musalman rule and said there was so much oppression. What did God do to prevent it? Now he suddenly changed the topic because Holy Mother has promised him that if I see a vision, if I get some direct experience, I'll tell you that right now. And I have to tell the master that he doesn't believe what you had said to somebody. So he wants direct experience. But then he asks another trivial, of course, this is a trivial question, a social question. He says, what, but he still wants to know why, including the Banaras. There were many temples which were desecrated by the invaders. So he says, what did God do to prevent it? He was a bit upset. He said, why did not God prevent it? Then mother says, God has infinite patience. People, then she says something so logical and rational. He says, God has infinite patience. Otherwise, you people pour water in jugs over his head day and night. Are you not torturing him? Is he not bearing all these things? What silly rituals we do to get some worldly benefit. The pujaris say you have to pour jugfuls. So he says, poor Shiva has to sit. Imagine a person sitting down and day and night people coming and pouring ghee, and then sometimes it appears to be very ridiculous. You know, you pour doodh, you pour panchamrut, and in the name of, I mean, if one can imagine, if one has to, uh, so your Holy Mother, you see how rational she is, how normally people who are having university education and other things, they will say such things, and they will say, oh, we are rational people, we don't believe this, all superstition. Holy Mother was not educated in the modern Western sense, but you see how she says, because she feels Shivalinga is somebody, it's something alive, it is conscious. And how can you treat a conscious being? That's why when Shashi Maharaj used to feed Thakur, it was not just a puja. He used to literally feel that Sri Ramakrishna is still alive. And for him, he was alive. So how would he treat Sri Ramakrishna if he was alive? If Shiva was really alive, would you pour all this water? So he says, don't worry when people come and break the temples and all those. He is not worried because he has so much patience that no matter how much water you pour on him, he doesn't bother. Does it affect him in the least? Or they worship him covering the image with dry clothes? Does it trouble him at all? God's patience knows no limit. Sometimes you see some of the deities are dressed with so much of jewelry and heavy things. A normal human being would not bear the load of that. Just imagine decking you with so many clothes that you are hardly able to move. You have been covered with clothes and clothes that they, in the name of Shringara, there is the Shringaras. The priests say the richer you are, the more money you give, these costly saris, and if it's a female deity, it will be sari, otherwise dhoti, they will wrap around him. So either you pour water or you wrap him with clothes, and still he has infinite patience. So God's patience knows no limit. So you don't have to bother whether somebody breaks him or breaks that. It may be significant to you, but his pure consciousness, he is not going to be affected He has more patience than human beings. He doesn't react like people do. So that is the answer she gives. A very, very clever answer, and a very, very the answer is so to the point that she doesn't discuss it further, because then there is no end to it. If you say it's the will of God, then you'll have to explain why. Even Swami Vivekananda once went to Chir Bhavani and he saw a dilapidated temple of the mother. So he just felt indignant. He said, if I were there, I would have built a golden temple of, I would have not allowed this to happen, not allowed the invaders to desecrate the image. I would have then, Holy Mother just in a vision, not Holy Mother, the Divine Mother says, is it you who are protecting me, or I who am protecting you? And then she said, if I wanted, I could have created a 7 temple golden temple here, right on this very spot, if my will is there. But you don't have to bother about it, because it is I who am saving you. So these iniquities or these troubles which invaders and the so many things which happen with the temple and the pouring of water and all, it may be a trouble for us, but for God, he who has infinite patience, these really don't matter at all. Then she says, uh, the following morning, Mother had said to Khagen Maharaj, last night I lay awake on my bed when I suddenly saw the image of Narayana of the Shades temple of Brindavan standing by my side. Now she had a vision. The garland of flowers around the neck of the deity hung up to the feet. The master, means Sri Krishna, was already had taken Mahasamadhi, was standing with hands in front of the image. I thought, how could the master come here? I said, Rasbihari does not want to believe. He does not want to believe that one gets mukti if one dies in Banaras. How can it be? The master said, he must. This is all true. So after that, Holy Mother, after she has a vision of Thakur, herself, who himself tells Holy Mother, then she herself hears Thakur telling this, and in this vision, then she will go and tell Rasbihari, see, this is what I heard, so it should be true. This is all true. He meant that one dying in Banaras does gain liberation. The Narayana image told me two things. She saw the Narayana image of Brindavan suddenly coming live here, and Thakur is standing with folded hands. So she was surprised, and then she immediately asked Thakur, because Rasbihari Maharaj had asked, I want to hear from you whether it is really true. If you say so, I'll believe. So Sri Krishna confirms that now. Khagen Maharaj says, why did the master stand? Then she says, the Narayana image, Narayana image with the vision told me two things. One was, can one ever get the knowledge of reality unless one knows the truth about God? The other thing I do not recall. So Holy Mother doesn't remember what was said, but the first thing he said was, we cannot understand reality unless we understand the truth about God. So once we know the nature of God, or once we experience the nature of God, then we'll understand what reality is, what is the truth behind this whole universe, truth behind Prakriti. So Khagen Maharaj, who was there, asked this question, what did the master stand with folded hands? Why did the master stand with folded hands before the image of Narayana which you saw? Mother said that was his characteristic attitude. He was humble before all. I called on the mother in the morning and asked her, referring to the conversation of the previous day. So Rasbihari Maharaj had not forgotten. So he said, did you ask the master? What did he say about dying in Banaras? Please tell me if one dying in Banaras gains liberation. What have you seen? The mother says, the scriptures say so. Besides, again she says the same thing. Besides, so many people come here with this faith. What else can happen to him who has taken refuge in the Lord? So even now, she is not willing to tell the whole truth, because she heard the master saying that, but she will say later on. Now you will see how slowly she is trying to, because perhaps her intention is that Rasbihari Maharaj should believe the scriptures. If he starts losing faith in the scriptures, then it is not a good sign. So he says, not only the scriptures, but so many people come here with this faith and they die here. So what else can happen to him, one who has taken refuge in the Lord? They come here definitely with the intention of getting mukti. Otherwise, why will they come here to die? So mother says, the disciple says, it is of course true that he who has taken refuge in the Lord will be liberated. But take the case of those who have not surrendered themselves to God, who are not his devotees, or who do not belong, or who belong to other faiths. Will they also get liberation by dying at Banaras? Now this is Ras Bihari Maharaj. Then mother says, because of the vision she had of Thakur, she says, yes, they too. I mean, those who have not surrendered, those who don't have faith, those who are not devotees, or those who belong to some other faith. Banaras is permeated with the Spirit of God. All living beings of this place, even the moths and insects, are filled with divine consciousness. Any being that dies here, be it a devotee, an atheist, or one belonging to another religion, or even an insect or moth, will surely be liberated. Then the disciple gets confused. What? Even a moth will be liberated? So he says, are you speaking the truth? He's asking mother, his own guru. Mother says, yes, it is true indeed. Otherwise, how can you explain the glory of this holy place? So this is the conviction mother had after Thakur himself confirmed that what I said was true. Then nearby there were some sweets that had been offered to the Lord. A fly buzzing about sat on my arm. Pointing to it, I said, Ras Bihari Maharaj said, even this fly will get liberation. Mother says, yes, even that fly. All living beings of this place are filled with the Spirit of God. Bhudev wanted to take home two young pigeons that had been caught in the niche over the staircase. Two pigeons had unfortunately got caught. So Bhudev, who wanted to take it to Kamarpukur or Jairambati, mother said to him, no, 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 don't take them away. They are original inhabitants of Banaras. That means don't take it away to die in some other place. They are inhabitants, or original inhabitants. Maybe because of lot of karma, these two pigeons will get liberation. So you please don't take them from here. The women coming from far East Bengal live in the Bengali Tola. They have no love for their homes and properties, friends and relatives, but they have all settled down here, leaving everything they have come here to in order to breathe their last in Banaras. You see, they have such wonderful wisdom. They are without any attachment. Disciple. You see how spiritual are the people of East Bengal. Mother says, yes, that's true. People of our district are devoid of spiritual wisdom. She's saying it in a very general way. Take the case of the father-in-law of Radhu. Now she is giving some particular examples. His family owns a house in Banaras. Still, the members of the family are frightened at the very mention of Banaras. So how worldly people who are living far off, they come and to die in Banaras, and here somebody has a house in Banaras. The people who come from far off places, they don't even have property here. They just stay in this chatra and just wait till they die. Their only consolation or hope is that they should die here. And he says, but you see the people of my area, I mean, where Radhu was married, the members of that family are so worldly that they are frightened at the name of very mention of Banaras. They fancy that they will not die if they cling to their native village. You see, they have that superstition that whatever happens, we will not leave our native village. We may have a house in Banaras. So all people are not lucky or wise to take the right decision. Death, however, moves with us as our shadow. Then disciple says, are you really speaking the truth when you say that one dying year gains liberation? You see, the disciple is still having doubts. Mother says very sharply, I cannot swear before you thrice. There is a saying where they say if you say anything thrice, then it is like swearing. You have to say the same thing thrice. So that was the custom. So then you believe somebody. if somebody repeats it thrice. He said, I am not going to say it thrice. I can't swear before you. I have told you once, you are again and again asking me, do we really, a person who dies? Swearing once is bad enough. Swearing 3 times, and that too in Banaras. So this is not a place where you can just trifle with anybody. So she gets a bit upset with Rasbihari that now, in spite of mother herself telling him, he is not having that faith. Then disciples then smiles and says, please see that I do not die in Banaras. In that case, where shall I be and where will you be? We shall not see each other. Now you see how much devoted this disciple is. He says, I don't care. I don't want mukti. If I die here, then where will you be and where will I be? Then, so he says, I don't want to die in Banaras. So we shall not see each other. He prefers to be in the company of Holy Mother rather than die in Banaras away from her. Then Holy Mother smilingly says, how stupid. He says he does not want to die in Banaras. Then the disciple says, Mother, seeing is believing. One believes in a statement when it can be corroborated by direct perception. Then, I mean, he's still having doubt. Said he still doesn't have that faith. So mother says, what else shall you do if you do not believe in the words of high-souled men? Is there any other way except the one trodden by sages and seers and other holy men? So now she's trying her last effort. Said, I have told my best. Now what can I do if you don't believe even the statements of holy people? Then the disciple says, none indeed. What else can I do but listen to the seers who have had direct perception? So then finally the disciple says, yes, how can I listen to anybody else other than these people? That is why I put the question to you. I shall let you go only when you have given me a direct reply. Mother says, now she says something, because this disciple is determined now. Again and again he wants to hear from Holy Mother. So he says, then she gets a little upset. Does it matter the least to God whether you believe in him or not? Even the sage Sukadeva was to him like a big ant at the most. He is infinite. How much can you understand of him? Our master was a man of direct perception. He saw everything, he knew everything. His words are the words of the Veda. What will you do if you do not believe in his words? The scriptures may differ, the disciple says. Some scriptures say this, other scriptures say that. Which shall we accept? That is why I am bothering you. So he's torn between the different ideas he gets from the scriptures. So then he says, that's why I'm bothering you. Mother says, that's true indeed. The almanac makes a forecast of rain, but you do not get a drop by squeezing its pages. Besides, the scriptures are filled with many useless things also. One cannot observe to the letter the injunctions of the scriptures. The master used to say, the bhakti hedged round by scriptural injunctions hardly justifies the name. So here Holy Mother is saying, what you say is partially correct, because all the scriptures, you have to choose the essence of the scriptures. That is what Sri Ramakrishna did. That's why direct experience is always better than blindly following the scriptures. And moreover, Holy Mother says there are certain wrong things or certain incomplete or inaccurate things in the name of scriptures. Scriptures is always a mixture of the highest truths mixed with lower truths, because they were written at during times, during different times, and recorded by people of different realizations. So there are lower truths, there are higher truths, there are the supreme truths. So unless one has the experience of the supreme truths, one should not believe. So I shall conclude now, and I'll see, just there are I think 2 questions in the chat. So I'll maybe answer. Yeah. There are just two questions. One is, in the context of today's talk, you mentioned about the impurity of people. Could you please elaborate on purity in spiritual life and what it means? Thakur says that pure mind is akin to pure buddhi. Could you please elaborate? Yeah, I have been talking of this purity and impurity in almost every class. giving the true definition of purity, because what people are so confused regarding purity. It is very, very clear that other than consciousness or other than buddhi, which is the pure reflection of the consciousness, anything that is gross is impure. So the lower you go, you start with the Annamaya Kosha. I have told this Kosha theory so many times. What do you mean? Why do we distribute a human personality into these five koshas? We begin with the Annamaya Kosha, the gross body. Then we go to the higher Pranamaya Kosha, then Manomaya Kosha, the mind. Then we go to the Vijnanamaya Kosha, where the Buddhi is there, which is a higher level. And then we have the Anandamaya Kosha and the Supreme Consciousness, Purusha or Brahman, which is beyond that. So a person who is going down is becoming impure. It's a very simple logic. The more gross you are, the more impure you are. The more, how do you judge a purity? That the more you live on a higher plane, the more you hang on to the permanent, the less you hang on to the temporary or the gross, the more you are pure. Purity increases in proportion to the capacity, to one's capacity to hold on to the permanent for a larger period of time. Maybe today, if you are, say, 60% pure, tomorrow, if you can meditate or focus or hold on to the permanent for a little more while than what you did today, then you may say that you are becoming purer. So, the purity and impurity of people is directly proportional to the grossness they have. The grosser you are, the more materialistic you are, the more impure you are. That's a simple theory. It's not just based on what you do or what you do not do. Doing and not doing, the moral laws do not define purity. There may be general laws of purity and impurity, but the basis of all the laws is how gross you are, how much dependent you are on the grosser things, and how much faith you put on these temporary things. The lesser faith you have, the more faith you have in the higher things, the more pure you are. That's the simplest thing. So when Thakur says pure mind is akin to pure buddhi, what he meant was, what do you mean by the pure mind? He also said the pure mind and the pure buddhi and the pure atma are one. So when a mind becomes pure, and when the buddhi becomes pure, then consciousness is reflected fully in the body and the mind. So then you say even the body of an incarnation is pure, or a body of a saint is pure, not because it is gross. It is gross, but the consciousness is reflected to such an extent that the mind will never make mistakes, the buddhi will never make mistakes, even the body will consciously or unconsciously do the right thing. That's why Thakur used to say, an expert dancer will never have a false step. So he'll never take a false step. So that is what purity and impurity means. And the last question I'll see, I will answer and then we'll close for today. As I understand, mantra or japa is more important than rituals. Rituals are not obligatory as japa mantra ucharan are. Uh, yeah, now what is obligatory, what is not obligatory, it's an individual choice. Now there are people who have taken mantra diksha, but they still hold on to rituals. If one feels they are obligatory, then one is bound to them. Then you have to do it or you may do it. But one who has already got japa and mantra and they are also some kind of ritual only. What do you mean by rituals? Rituals can be gross, rituals can take you towards the gross or take you towards the subtle. Mantra is a ritual which is sattvic, takes you towards the higher consciousness. The other rituals have the danger of taking you. See, for example, you have this idea of chappan bhog. In some traditions, they think God will be very happy if you, chappan means 556 in Gujarati. So they believe that the more the number of items you offer, and you find it in most of the religions also, elaborate worship, and then people appreciate that. They think, oh, wonderful, so many items, how much effort has gone behind all this. So it is a ritual. But then what is the intention of offering? Finally, you are keen to consume them as prasad as early as possible. Whether God is pleased or not, I'm not saying they are wrong, but the thing is the intentions behind them. If they are wrong, then these obligatory, so-called obligatory rituals can be harmful. Because who made them obligatory? Patram pushpam phalam toyam means just a simple flower, or even if you don't have one simple leaf, pushpam, patram means leaf, pushpam, phalam, or one fruit, or even if that is not there, toyam means water. So you can offer anything, any ritual is fine enough. You, nobody has told you to offer 56 types of food, sweets, and all those things. So rituals are obligatory if you think they are obligatory. We create these obligatory things because that is how we will enjoy the prasad afterwards. If you just offer leaves, how many people will come for that puja or ritual? He said after puja you'll get a one spoon of water because that is what we have offered, charnamrut. So that's why people make this obligatory and increase the rituals to attract people who have gross desires. So that's why in that sense mantra is more important than ritual, because repeating the mantra, the benefit is going to you and to the people around you in a subtle way. There's nothing gross about it. The more mantra you repeat, the more nice you feel, the more elevated you feel, the more subtle you feel, the more purity will be there. Because if you define purity and impurity as the increasing in subtle nature, your own subtle personality, living more in the subtle personality, so subtler and subtler, higher and higher levels. If mantra is helps you to do that, then this mantra is important than these rituals. Okay, so that is the answer. So I'll take your leave now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So tomorrow the gospel class will be as usual 5:30